While most NFL players go their whole lives without seeing the inside of a jail cell, certain players have crossed the threshold with their heinous actions to end up incarcerated. Today I wanted to go over some of the worst criminals in NFL history. If you enjoy this type of content, consider pressing the like button and subscribing because we post videos like this every other day. The first person I wanted to talk about is Dwayne Goodrich. He played college football at the University of Tennessee, and going into the 2000 NFL Draft, he was a pretty high-rated prospect at cornerback. He was selected in the second round of the 2000 Draft with the 49th overall pick, and was injured in training camp, which meant he appeared in only 5 games his rookie season. In 2001, he suffered a torn Achilles and was placed on the injured reserve before playing in 11 games in the 2002 season. He was a fine player, but just 3 weeks into the 2003 season, he committed an act that would land him behind bars for a long time. In January of 2003, Goodrich was involved in an accident that ended the existence of 2 individuals. After the accident occurred, he decided to flee the scene and had to be tracked down by police officers. Goodrich had hit 2 motorists who were attempting to rescue a man from a burning car on a Dallas freeway. Several witnesses said Goodrich had been traveling at well over 100 miles per hour, but struck the accident at 80 miles per hour. After he was arrested and charged with vehicular manslaughter, he was waived by his former NFL team, who clearly wanted to distance themselves from the case. In September of 2003, his trial began, and at the end of it, he was found guilty and sentenced to 7.5 years in prison alongside a $20,000 fine. He was found guilty on 2 counts of criminally negligent charges related to the crash. In 2006, the families of the victims and the prosecutors attempted to add 5 years to his sentence, and it was revealed during the second trial that it was not proven if he had been intoxicated during the accident. He was released from prison in 2011 after serving 8 years with good behavior, and since has disappeared from the public eye and is most likely attempting to live a normal life as of today. Tommy Kane had played football at Syracuse University. While there, he had had legal trouble while attending the college. He was arrested in 1988 for assaulting a police officer after the officer attempted to have his car towed for being illegally parked. He received community service as a result, but went on to have a very successful college career and was a 3rd-round pick for the Seahawks just months after his arrest while attending college. He was a fine receiver for the first 2 years of his career and had a breakout season in 1990 where he had over 700 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. In 1992, he was cut from the Seahawks and went on to play a season in the CFL after that. After retiring from football, he married Tamara Sheikh, but that union would come to a tragic end in November of 2003. Tommy had developed a severe alcohol addiction after retiring from football, and his wife and family had grown extremely concerned about his behavior and actions. His wife had brought a church counselor to his mother's home with the intention of escorting Kane to a rehab facility so he could begin to receive treatment for his addiction. This apparently infuriated Tommy to the point he attacked his wife. Tommy proceeded to attack his wife so severely that she sadly passed away in the arms of the church counselor she had brought for support. The couple had been recently separated, but she had still cared deeply for Tommy and wanted him to get treatment. His original charge was a 2nd-degree charge, but he would plead guilty to manslaughter. The biggest reason for the plea was the inability to prove whether or not Tommy had intentionally done the damage he had to his wife. He claimed to not fully remember the act, and as a result, when he agreed to plead guilty to the slightly lesser charges, the court agreed. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison as a result of this attack, and in 2010, he was ordered to pay $600,000 to his ex-wife's family, including the children he shared with Tamara. As of 2015, he was allowed out on day parole as he finished the rest of his 18-year sentence, and as of now, he is still under police supervision but has re-entered society and stayed largely off the radar. Not much is known about his current whereabouts or occupation, but the attack on his wife is still having tragic implications for her family and his children. It really is a tragic case. Eric Naposki had played college football at Connecticut. However, he had serious tension with his head coach that led to him forgoing his senior year entirely. He attended a training camp for the Patriots and made the team in 1988. After that, he signed with the Cowboys, Colts, Patriots, and Jets before spending some time with the Barcelona Dragons of the World League of American Football. While in Europe, he was elite, having 16.5 sacks, 1 interception, 1 touchdown, and several blocked field goals. After retiring, he moved to California and began trying to adjust to a normal life. Somehow he found himself entangled in an affair with a woman who was dating a millionaire investor in Newport Beach. Together, the two of them concocted a plan to collect a $2.5 million life insurance policy after taking out her boyfriend. William McLaughlin was attacked outside of his home in Newport Beach on December 15th of 1994. He could not overcome his injuries, and cops soon found that Eric had been the perpetrator alongside the deceased's girlfriend, Nanette Ann Johnson. Nanette had taken out a huge life insurance policy right before the attack, which gave investigators a clear motive. And when it was found out the two were having an affair, the picture became clear. However, getting enough evidence to truly convict the two took much longer than anticipated. It would be over 15 years before the two were charged in connection with the crime in 2009. During their 2011 trial, several witnesses testified that Nanette had become entangled with William after his divorce, despite being 25 years younger than him. They also attested to the two being engaged in an affair, and the case was based around Naposki committing the act to get financial gain. He was convicted in October of 2011 and was sentenced to the maximum imprisonment within California law, which was life without the possibility of parole. Since then, he has tried for nearly a decade to make appeals, based upon a biased jury and faulty jury instructions. None of these appeals have been approved, but to this day, he maintains that he is completely innocent and was not involved in the actions regardless of what the courts say. He claims the lack of DNA evidence and witnesses proves he wasn't involved, but considering the only two living witnesses have both been convicted of the crime, he has quite the challenge in front of him if he ever wants to be a free man again. Darren Sharper had played college football at William & Mary. He didn't have a ton of hype going into the draft, but in 1997 he was selected by the Packers, where he developed into an elite safety. From there, he went to the Vikings and Saints, where he would put together a great enough career to get himself onto the 2000s All-Decade team. He made several Pro Bowls and won a Super Bowl with the Saints, where he put on a great performance against the Colts. However, his fame and notoriety was being used to cover up the absolute monster underneath the service. In 2011, shortly after he retired, two women filed a criminal complaint against Sharper with the Miami Police Department. They alleged they had potentially been assaulted after passing out on Sharper's couch in his condo. The police didn't really follow through in this allegation, and he would go on to do this several more times. In 2013, he was accused in February of a similar act in New Orleans, and this was followed up with more criminal complaints in August, September, October, November, and January of the following year. All of these allegations followed a similar path of the initial allegation. Women would wake up after being given substances and find pieces of their clothing missing. In 2014, Sharper was arrested in Los Angeles on 2 charges related to his crimes. He was eventually charged with 2 counts of one of the worst crimes you can commit and 5 related felonies. This was followed up with charges in Louisiana, Arizona, and Nevada. He reached a plea deal with California and Arizona, which led to him being sentenced to 20 years in LA County. Then he was found guilty in Nevada and sentenced to an additional 3 to 8 years. This was followed up with a federal conviction which carried 9 years and a Louisiana conviction worth 18 years. Unfortunately, all of these sentences will run concurrently. As of today, he is set to be released in late 2028, and it's assumed he will try to slink out of the public eye. However, the conditions of his conviction means he has to register with the local database, and his information will at least be known to protect individuals in the area from someone with his reputation and access to dangerous chemicals he used to act out his sick fantasies. CJ Spillman was a free safety at Marshall who had a great college career but had several injuries as a senior that led to him going undrafted before he was signed by the Chargers in 2010. He was waived after a short period but was claimed by the 49ers and proceeded to show he was a great option on special teams. He signed a 3-year contract after that and began to make more regular appearances on the defense as well. He was cut in August of 2014 and signed with the Cowboys shortly after, but it came out in October he was under investigation for assault. He played that season on the Cowboys, but after the season was brought in on charges of assault in Tarrant County, Texas. According to the allegations, he invited a woman he met in another city to Dallas after he signed with the team. They were staying in a resort where Spillman had assaulted the woman during their stay. She later went to the police to report the incident, and he was brought to trial. On trial, Spillman maintained the entire interaction had been consensual, but the jury did not believe his version of events. He was found guilty and sentenced to 5 years in prison as a result of his actions. He was released in 2019 and currently works as an entrepreneur in the Dallas area. He also says on his LinkedIn page that he works in real estate, but he will always have the stain of his assault on his record. Regardless of how good you can play on the football field, you aren't able to use that position to violate people's consent just because you're an athlete. Anthony Smith had played football in Arizona and Alabama, where he had made a name for himself as an elite defensive end. He had grown up in a rough situation, but many people thought that his ability on the field would allow him to escape his violent upbringing. In 1990, he was drafted 11th overall by the Los Angeles Raiders, but in practice before the season began would tear his MCL and miss his entire rookie year. He would go on to have a great following 2 years, and even signed a 4-year extension with the team, but in 1997 he decided to opt out of his contract and leave the NFL entirely. Many were confused on why he would just watch away from the game, but it would be the allure of the streets that had called to him so strongly. Despite walking away from a $7.6 million extension, he found himself embroiled in a feud with a furniture store over money for a purchase. Deciding to take matters into his own hands, he allegedly firebombed the store that had wronged him in an attempt to get even. He was put on trial twice for this crime, but after both trials resulted in a hung jury, the charges were dismissed. This made Smith feel untouchable, and his crimes escalated. In 2011, he was charged in connection for a 2008 crime that ended the life of Murillo Ponce. He had been beaten and dumped in Lancaster, California. Ponce had been a mechanic, and detectives believe Smith had taken him out after a deal gone wrong. He was found guilty at trial, and while awaiting retrial was charged with 3 other crimes: a kidnapping and violent act, and a stabbing of another man in 2001. They had enough evidence for him to stand trial for all 4 bodies, and in 2015, he was convicted of his crimes and sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. He is still in prison but is working his way through his appeals. The chance of him getting off of all the guilty charges is slim to none, but he still is afforded a certain amount of appeals under law. Kellen Winslow Jr. is the son of NFL Hall of Fame tight end Kellen Winslow. His son followed in his footsteps and played his position at the University of Miami, where he was a standout and was drafted with the 6th overall pick of the 2004 NFL Draft. It made him the highest selected tight end in more than 30 years, but he broke his leg his rookie season and followed it up with an injury in 2005 due to a motorcycle accident. In 2006, he had a breakout year, and in 2007 also had a solid year. In 2008, he was hospitalized with a staph infection. After that, he moved to Tampa and would finish out his career with several different NFL teams. In 2014, he was charged with possession of synthetic herb and was arrested fleeing a mobile home park in 2018. Just a week later, he was charged for kidnapping and violating consent of 2 women. While on house arrest that same month, he was charged with another assault from 2003 when he had been 19 years old. As a result, his bond was revoked and he was arraigned on another 2 new charges for lewd conduct. While on this spree, he also got charges for battery of an elder and willful cruelty to an elderly person. He was convicted for several of these crimes in June of 2019. As a result, he was sentenced to 14 years in prison in 2021 and is currently incarcerated in Tehachapai, California. This case appears to have done a huge amount of damage to his father, Kellen Winslow, who was at almost every court appearance his son had during his trial. For such a legendary player to have such a horrible offspring is sad, and I feel terrible for the many people he affected on his crime spree. It's crazy, while out on bond for other charges, he continued his spree of lewd acts and assaults. He truly had no regard for anyone. Keith Wright played college football at Missouri and was expected to be a 3rd or 4th round pick in the 2003 NFL Draft. He fell to the 6th round where he was selected by the Houston Texans. He didn't really have a huge impact, but did get contracts with the Colts, Buccaneers, Cardinals, and NFL Europe before giving up on football and trying to adjust to a normal life. However, he soon found it hard to keep steady work as football was all he had ever really been great at and turned to crime to try to make ends meet. In 2011, he was the perpetrator of a string of home invasions near Sacramento. In one of these, he assaulted 2 women and forced them to pull money out of 2 ATMs. The violence of his crime, alongside the several instances of blatant disregard for others, rights, and property, made him the subject of a massive manhunt. He was charged in 2012 with 19 charges including armed robbery, kidnapping, forced actions, burglary, and false imprisonment. The trial revealed several shocking details as to the violence of his crime and the the judge and jury were so shocked that after he was found guilty, he was sentenced to 234 years in prison. Donte Stallworth was born in Sacramento and wound up playing college football at the University of Tennessee. His nickname was Hands, and he was incredible at making catches most people would find impossible. Coming into the 2002 draft, he was one of the top wide receiver prospects in the draft and was drafted by the New Orleans Saints with the 13th overall pick. He would be on the team for 4 years, but never lived up to the billing of a first-round pick and would switch to several teams before ending up in Cleveland for the 2008 season. At the end of the year, he was enjoying the off-season in Miami when he would hit and terminate a pedestrian on the MacArthur Causeway. The man had been waiting for a bus after his shift when Stallworth hit him with his Bentley Continental GT. As the police investigated, Stallworth admitted to having been drinking earlier in the night before the events took place. When they tested his blood, it was found that his blood alcohol content was 0.12, which was 0.04 higher than the legal limit. In April, he was charged with DUI manslaughter and he would surrender to police and received a plea deal with a slap on the wrist for a punishment. He was sentenced to 30 days in the county jail, 1,000 hours of community service, and 8 years of probation. His driver's license in Florida was also permanently suspended. While he was suspended for the entirety of the 2009 season, he would reach an agreement with the Reyes family for a financial settlement. After the year suspension, he was reinstated by Roger Goodell and went on to have a contract with the Baltimore Ravens, Washington Redskins, New England Patriots, and the Redskins once again before retiring. He currently works as a strategy consultant for a consulting firm that focuses on securing public venues against potential attacks from nefarious organizations. Aaron Hernandez played college football for the Florida Gators, where he was a star. Due to off-field concerns about his life choices and childhood, he fell in the draft to the 4th round, where he was selected by the New England Patriots in 2010. He paired up with Rob Gronkowski to make one of the best tight end duos in league history, and he would go on to make several Pro Bowl rosters over his short career. In the 2013 offseason, he was arrested and charged with the offing of Odin Lloyd, who had been dating the sister of his fiancée. He was immediately released by the Patriots and was awaiting trial as more violent crimes came to light. The police searched his home in connection to a body found a mile from his house. When police connected his weapon to the scene, he was officially charged with that and 5 weapons-related charges. While a motive has never been officially declared, it is thought by police that Odin had found out a secret about Aaron's sexuality, and Aaron was afraid he would expose him. Alongside this case, he was also charged with being involved in a 2012 Boston double offing where his SUV was placed at the scene of the crime. While he was indicted for this crime, he was not found guilty of pulling the trigger, and this charge was vacated. He was also facing another witness intimidation charge related to yet another shooting. But before that could go to trial, he was found in his cell after deciding to take himself out of the world. It appears he had tried to take advantage of a legal doctrine which vacates a conviction if the defendant passes away before his appeals are exhausted. This would have given his family quite a substantial payout from his assets. He was found to have severe CTE. Prosecutors also blocked the ability to vacate the eviction despite Aaron's actions, which prevented what many assumed was his master plan from coming to fruition. Ryan Leaf is one of the most infamous draft busts in NFL history. After a great career at Washington State, he was selected with the 2nd overall pick in 1998 before flaming out after a short career that I think most people would agree was disappointing to say the least. He had a lot of issues with his work ethic and seemed to want to party much more often than he wanted to practice. After being cut, it wasn't like his lifestyle changed, and soon he had burned through all of his NFL money and was left without many employable skills that could lead to him getting a steady job and employment elsewhere. So soon he turned to crime to keep up his expensive drug habit and flashy lifestyle. In May of 2009, he was indicted on charges of burglary and controlled substance charges in Texas. At the time, he was in a rehab program in British Columbia, Canada. When he returned to the USA, he was arrested by customs officers. He would plead guilty to 7 counts of obtaining a controlled substance and 1 count of delivering a controlled substance, which were all felonies. He was sentenced to 10 years of probation and fined $20,000 as a result of his actions. 3 years later, he was once again arrested on burglary charges alongside more controlled substance charges in his hometown in Montana. He was sentenced to 7 years in custody with 2 years suspended if he followed certain conditions, but he would violate those and would be back in custody shortly after. He was released in 2014 and then had another run-in with the law in 2020 where he was arrested for misdemeanor domestic battery in Palm Desert, California. While he got another 3 years of probation because of that, he has since stayed clean and now works in sports media, mostly covering college football and the NFL. Those are just 11 of the NFL's worst criminals in league history. While not every crime is the same severity, I thought it served as a solid video to summarize what a lot of these people had done to end up in prison or jail. There are a lot more guys with small things like herb possession once or twice, but I don't think that really compares with being a career criminal or violent acts like those on this video. If you enjoyed the video, I would appreciate you pressing the like button and subscribing because we post videos like this often. Thank you for watching. Our last video went over the AFC West rivalries, so you should check that out too.